Hello and welcome to another episode of the ADHD Goals podcast. I'm delighted to tell you that today's topic is meditation and its benefits for ADHD. And I have a superb guest to help me talk about that today. His name is Bob Martin, and he has come from being a high powered mob lawyer during Miami's wild cocaine cowboy days to becoming a certified meditation teacher. He's now a two-time published author and professor of wellness at Elon University. And Bob blends Taoist wisdom, brain science, psychology, and humor to tackle everything from breaking free of limiting beliefs to finding clarity and resilience in life's chaos. So welcome to the show, Bob. How are you doing today?
I'm doing real well today, and I hope that you are. And I appreciate the platform and the opportunity to talk with you and your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'll be diving into a really fascinating topic in terms of meditation and ADHD. When it comes to talking about meditation for myself, it's something that I talk fondly about, as in when I tell people the benefits that I've had from meditation, I can reflect back on times where I've practiced meditation over a period of time, and the benefits have been really good in terms of helping me be more considerate in my responses, giving me a bit more time to allow me to respond better to things. But on the flip side of that, I do find it hard to practice meditation consistently because there are times where I just think to myself, oh, the thought of sitting quietly and knowing that all those thoughts are going to jump in can be quite daunting. And I think many listeners with ADHD will probably resonate with that. So that's something I'd love to get into more detail. But first of all, I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about you and your background, because as I mentioned in your bio, in the introduction there, you've got an interesting story to tell.
It truly is. So my life was, I can't say that it was planned out. There was just an awful lot of coincidences or synchronicity and things that happened. It seemed doors closed and doors opened, and I just kind of traveled through my 75 years. But I grew up in an amusement park. My folks found that their path to the American dream, as we call it on this side of the pond, is popcorn and caramel corn. And
So,
so
so
I
literally an amusement park. That's not a metaphor for.
literally, it's
Okay.
literally amusement park and carnivals in a trailer and popcorn and cotton candy and caramel corn. And by
Wow.
the time I was 12 years old, I was mixing popcorn into caramel and making all that, cleaning the heads of cotton candy machines. And yeah, that's what I grew up.
Wow.
By happenstance, I became a lawyer, and it wasn't because I have any great academic prowess. I flunked out of Boston University, and one law school took a chance on me, so it wasn't as if I was a top flight student. But when I got to law school, all of a sudden something clicked, and all of a sudden I realized that I had the possibility. There was something that I might make a difference in the world. All of a sudden, and from that point on, it was I'm in 100%. And I went through law school and graduated and got a job in Miami in the 1970s during the anybody seen the movie Scarface or the TV show Miami Vice?
Yeah.
Those were the days that we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
And talking about cocaine traffickers walking into banks with suitcases full of cash, not
Yeah.
to launder. And so I worked as a prosecutor, and through that, we did some damage to the mob, and through that, when I went out in private practice, they thought I was a pretty good lawyer, so they decided to hire me. And that's how life was going, and I was very successful professionally. I was making money hand over foot, and I was able to pay my house off in a few years outside of law school and the like. But the arrogance, the thinking that I was the cat's meow, hanging out with these guys, things were kind of falling apart internally, and I was seeing a therapist. And long story short, I came to a place where I had to make a decision, and he resolved my question by throwing coins on the table, which surprised me. But the answer that he came up with from throwing the coins was that I needed to retreat. I cursed them out and I stomped out, but it was the right advice. And I pulled back from a lot of those behaviors. I went back and I asked him what those coins were. And he said, well, that was a Taoist practice called I Ching. And I didn't know much about Taoism. Many of your audience may not. I'll just say that it is a sister of Buddhism. And it basically teaches that timing is important in life and that there's a time there's a time to reap and a time to sow, and there's a time to move forward and a time to back up and a time to think and a time to act. And understanding and knowing those times and being sensitive to the flow that's around you and aligning yourself with the flow is what Taoism is about. And so it's kind of like an operating manual for living. And it did not, my folks, all of our ancestors were wiped out. My father's ancestors were wiped out by the Bolsheviks when they invaded Hungary back in the early 20th century. My mom was Roma Gypsy, and the Nazis wiped all her family out. So they didn't have much respect for religion.
Right.
So we didn't have that conversation in my home. But when I was in my 30s and all of a sudden I found out that my therapist was actually a primary student and an editor for Master Watching Me, a 72nd generation master monk from the Shaolin Temple, the Kung Fu Temple in China. And he came to Miami and I met him. And I know, Lawrence, there are probably times when you have met somebody and you just say, wow, this guy's got it and I want to know what he knows. And that's who Master Me was to me. And so I studied with him for 6 years. And then, ran into a little trouble with my mob clients, and we decided it was best that I move out of Miami and leave Miami.
Okay.
So I moved in a great culture shock to a rural part of the country, North Carolina. I don't know what the equivalent in the UK would be, but it would be like moving from London to some very rural area where the dialogue was completely different.
Yeah.
And I started attending Buddhist temples because there weren't many Taoists here. And then that's where I got into meditation. And then they asked me if I would engage in a 2-year, very intensive course of training to become a meditation teacher. And I did that and successfully covered that. And later found out that at Duke University, they were revamping the teaching of meditation so that it was more approachable by the Western mind. So I got certified in the Duke methodology, which has an app and a whole digital infrastructure. And it is, I don't know that I could have taught meditation in the Tibetan way I can tell you, until I went and got certified with the Duke program, it was very hard to get. Yeah, sure. Come sit on the cushion every week and we'll do something.
Yeah.
And just trust the process. Doesn't work. But the Duke program was finite. It's a 6-week program, 1 hour a week, 10 minutes a day. Give me that.
Yeah.
And it's definable and it's finite and it appeals to the Western mind. And so I've started teaching, and as it pertains to like your audience, so the way that the program works, can I go on with that? I know that.
Yeah, no, that's getting into
the way that the program works is that there is this digital infrastructure, and I am given a dashboard, and I never have more than 12 or 15 students at a time. Each student gets an app, and we meet for 1 hour a week, and I go ahead and teach them a technique. Maybe it's body scan, or maybe it's belly breathing, or maybe it's breath awareness. And they have those guided meditations on their app. And they also have a couple of other things. We know that if you keep a gratitude journal for 30 days, it increases your base level of happiness 18%. And so there's a gratitude journal built into the app. And I ask my students to listen to one of the guided meditations, 10 minutes a day. And then as soon as it's done, a little box opens up for them to log how that was for them. And then every morning that I get up in the morning at 4 o'clock And those 12 or 15 logs are sitting in my
Hmm.
dashboard. And I get to read them and I get to respond to them. Sometimes I just say, good job. You look, that was wonderful. Great insight. It goes
Hmm.
back. Sometimes it's paragraphs
Yeah.
of just depending on what the discovery has been. But I get to see their logs every single day, and every single day they get coaching back from me.
Yeah.
And that makes a huge difference because normally when people just go and see their meditation teacher once a week or once a month, they spend the week or the month building bad habits and then have to go. And then the
Hmm.
teacher says, no, don't do it that way, do it this way.
Yeah.
And they have to unbreak those habits. But that doesn't happen in this way because I see things every day.
Yeah.
And I have had, now let me preface this. Let me preface because it's a sensitive topic, I know, especially among the HDHD, the ADD and the ADHD population. Whether it is in fact something that's treatable or whether it's a figment of imagination. That's a sensitive topic. And I will say, and I do believe that there are people that use ADD and ADHD as an excuse in life. And then there are people that are truly diagnosed and have that difficulty and that challenge in life. So I have not been diagnosed with it. My mind is at this point comfortable. So I can't say from a personal perspective, but from the logs that I
Yeah.
get,
Yeah.
I can see every single day changes happening in the thinking. So there have been people that have come in that have said, well, I don't know that this is good for me because I'm ADD or I'm ADHD. And I've watched their logs and I've seen significant changes happen over a 4 or 5 week period. Now, can I tell you whether these people have been diagnosed or whether they are using the terminology, whether it's being used properly or not? I,
Yeah.
I can't tell you that.
So my thoughts on that particular topic, because I do think it's important in this sort of current climate of the awareness of ADHD growing. My understanding is that there is a biological ADHD where
Mhm.
somebody who has biological ADHD has a reduction in the number of dopamine receptors that are fueling the brain and therefore the executive function capabilities that we can have access to. And then there are people who are experiencing executive dysfunction due to lifestyle and the way that our diets and things like our devices and all the things that crash our dopamine baseline. And so we therefore have people that are experiencing biological ADHD and people that are experiencing executive dysfunction. And I think that is a symptom of society. And whilst they might look similar, I suppose you can you can improve executive dysfunction in the same similar ways that you would improve ADHD challenges. But I suppose with ADHD over a lifelong period of having these challenges, there's a lot more psychological labels that you attach to yourself, which need to reframe over time once you can work with the challenges. But yes, it certainly lends itself into the narrative of why are we experiencing lots of people questioning, have I got ADHD? And that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
So, I've been doing this now since the Duke experience with the Duke digital infrastructure since 2015. So that's 9 years. And I've had hundreds of students, many who identify as ADHD. And I've seen significant improvement. And I have not seen a terrific difference between people that come in and call themselves perfectionists, people that come in and simply say, I want to do this because I feel overwhelmed,
Yeah.
people that come in that say that identify with either ADD or ADHD, and people that are. I don't generally get folks that identify as depressed. I don't know
Hmm.
why. Meditation doesn't seem to be something that calls out to them, but it does call out to those particular populations. And those what many people say that's why they're taking the course. And I have to tell you, I do not see a lot of difference in the change in thinking between any of those. And I think my own theory is that because meditation is really about changing the structure of the brain by building new neural pathways, and that it may be a mental way of treating some of the biological dopamine minimization
Hmm.
by by building up the actual literal thickness of the neural pathways that can support that.
Yeah, like a mental gym.
Like a mental gym. Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I can tell you this, for example, the taxi cab drivers in London,
Oh,
they have to
yes. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
they have to undergo the black cabs.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
have to undergo a very strenuous test after they study the map that
The
they know every
knowledge. Yeah.
alleyway, the knowledge
Yeah.
of the town. Yeah, they can't just get licensed because and learn later. So they took pictures of the hippocampi. I say hippocampi because there's oh, but we normally say hippocampus. They took pictures of the hippocampus MRIs or whatever device they use before this study of the maps and
Hmm.
after the study of the maps. And they found that the hippocampi had not only grown longer and wider and taller, but
Hmm.
actually thicker. And so they had actually used their mind to change the structure of their brain to assist them in the skill that they wanted to develop.
Yeah.
And in meditation, we do certain repetitive practices which build neural pathways that relate to cultivating a tolerance for discomfort, cultivating loving kindness, compassion, but mostly cultivating a certain sense of self efficacy. And it is that sense of self efficacy, that sense I can do this.
Hmm.
It's a particular, in all meditation, there is the noticing, returning, and beginning again. I'll explain that in a minute.
Hmm.
And it is in that process where the healing occurs. Most people think that meditation is about either quieting the mind or it's about maintaining focus and training yourself to increase your ability to maintain focus. It is not. That may be a side effect of what occurs, that your focus increases, that your ability to stay on point increases. But it is not why you do the meditation. It's not the intent behind the practice. Okay.
Yeah.
It definitely is a side effect, which is welcome. So I know I'm talking a lot here. You want
No,
to
good.
jump in with any questions or
Well, I was just going to pick up on a few things that you said in
Mhm.
terms of the tolerance for discomfort. That that leaps out to me in terms of when I'm doing my ADHD coaching, when I sort of start off and I explain what a nice little metaphor for what's happening in the brain is the two systems that are at play. The human brain, which is where our executive functions are happening, and then our old part of the brain, the chimp brain, which is more of our fight, flight, and freeze
Mhm.
mechanisms. And if we haven't got enough dopamine to power those executive functions, it means we're going to be spending more time in our chimp brain and reacting in ways that when we look back on it, we also, "Well, I wish I hadn't have done it that way."
Mhm.
And I tend to like to think that meditation allows you a bit more of a switching mechanism to be able to have more time to notice when you are reacting in the chimp brain with fight, flight, or freeze mechanisms. And it builds up that tolerance to the discomfort to be able to say, okay, how can I do something that is going to help me to switch back into something that uses executive functions or power that back up?
Yeah. So, two things that you just mentioned, the chimp brain.
Yeah.
And the way that you described the chimp brain was the way that 99.8%, I made the
Yeah.
number up,
Yeah.
think of the chimp brain.
Yeah.
What we don't remember is that chimps are also social animals. Chimps feel affection. They
Yeah.
groom each other. They operate in tribes. They feel connection. that's also part of the chimp brain. And in our brain, the right side of our prefrontal cortex, where most of the executive function is the fight, flight, fear, stress, cortisol side of the brain. But the whole left side of the brain is the connection, creativity, love, affection, and the like. And so we don't remember that or when we think about the chimp brain, when we think about these things, we kind of forget that there's this other half of our brain that loves to watch a sunset, is completely blown away by watching the light come through a window of tinted glass. And what brain science has found is that you can measure that it is nearly impossible to reduce the electrical activity on the right side of the brain, the stress, your
Hmm.
stress. You can't reduce, I can't say, I don't want to be stressed. I'm
Yeah.
not going to be stressed. You can't do it.
Yeah.
If we go into a little bit of evolutionary psychology, we know that we spent 1.7 million generations as hunter gatherers. We've only been about 500 generations since agriculture
Yeah.
came around.
Yeah.
So we are the same body and mind that evolved for a very different environment than the one we are living in.
Yeah.
Our bright side brain, which wanders a lot, wanders because in the forest, it's vital to be always scanning the environment for danger,
Mm.
because danger came in the form of a tiger or a snake.
Hmm.
Today, danger comes in the form of a deadline.
Yeah.
It comes in the form of getting my kids to the soccer game.
Yeah.
It comes in the form of, I've got all these to-dos. It comes in the form of, I don't have enough money to pay my bills. But it's chronic and it's unidentifiable. And our poor brain is searching around knowing that there's something that's disturbing me, but I don't see the tiger and I don't see the snake and I don't know what it is. And I'm
Mm.
searching for the danger. And this causes chronic stress, which, is just a whole thing. And of course, when you're stressed, your brain, if it's searching for that danger, is going to go nuts, thinking it might be here, it might be here, it might be there, it might be here. So it's certainly, if it is not a root cause, it is certainly not a helper,
Hmm.
especially when we're ADD or ADHD. Certainly not a helper. So if we kind of recognize that wandering is something that is normal from the brain, if brain science tells us that there's very little we can do to reduce that sense of stress, to intentionally reduce it, what can we do? What we can do is balance it by activating the left side of the brain. So I have a little adage, little comment that I try to remember.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility to beauty.
Okay.
We have to, if we don't want to go down the rat hole, we have to intentionally cultivate beauty and curate our environment so that we are constantly activating the left side of the brain. Our goal is balance. Our goal is not to reduce this, but to build up that.
Yeah.
And so we need to go and lose ourselves for a moment. I often say in a sunset, I am weightless, but the slightest insult and I am lost in a mire of thoughts. And I say that because our sense of ego, how happy we are when we let it go and get lost in the sunset, and how unhappy we are when our ego is threatened in any way.
Oh, yeah.
And crazy. So, I mean, as an aside, just to put yourself in situations where you can express. Now, in meditation, we have the first stage of meditation is to build up the basic skills. I'll
Hmm.
talk about that in a moment. Once we have the basic skill, if you go out to learn to play tennis,
Yep.
you don't need to know the rules of the game until you can hit the ball over the net.
Right. Yeah.
Once you can hit the ball over the net, then you can learn the rules of the game.
Yeah. I like that.
So meditation is kind of like that. Once you get the basic skills, then what we do is we move into meditations that cultivate loving kindness, compassion, generosity. These are all antidotes to greed and hate and ignorance. And they are the things that balance our brain by building up the left side
Yeah.
of our brain. So that was one thing. And the other thing that you mentioned and that struck you as well was this tolerance for discomfort and how important that is. How many people do we know that live their lives with no tolerance for discomfort? And so, I mean, ultimately, at the extreme, you're going to stay inside your house and sit on the couch and watch mamby-pamby stupid television all day because there's no risk to it,
Yeah. Absolutely.
even as your life decays,
Yeah.
which is a great risk. But I often think of the tolerance for discomfort personally. I always avoided funerals because I was uncomfortable because I didn't know what to say and I didn't know what to do and I wasn't familiar with death and the like. So when you start to get older and a lot of your friends start dying, all of a sudden you start to develop an understanding of it. And so now I go to funerals. I still am uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but I can tolerate the discomfort.
Yeah.
And so I have the opportunity to sit with my friends and their grieving relatives and just be present for them. Being present for them opens my heart
Yeah.
and it increases my tolerance for discomfort. So it is very important. It is very important that we learn to tolerate discomfort and it's okay. And the next question you might have is, what does meditation do to help you tolerate
Well,
discomfort?
I was just wanted to before
Yeah.
we get into that, I was just wanted to
Okay.
because the last thing you said really sort of I think resonates a lot with what I hear speaking to people with ADHD, and the act of being present can be quite a challenge. And even the example that you gave of being at a funeral and being present for other people to maybe talk or whatever, it's quite a common thing. People with ADHD can tend to overshare and over chat in uncomfortable situations because they're uncomfortable with the silence, because they're afraid of being rejected, and therefore they think they need to keep talking to so that the people will like them. And in reality, sometimes you just got to be comfortable with the silence and letting somebody else speak. And when you're on your own, being present in the moment with your thoughts can be quite difficult. And you fill it with distraction or not trying to avoid sitting and
Or
listening
hyper
to something.
focusing
Yeah.
on something like a video game, something that has
Mhm.
rapid input and can occupy
Yeah. Or quietening it with substances.
quite a
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so I just wanted to highlight that because it struck me when you said it. So yeah, you were just about to go into the next bit.
So the basic instruction and the basic skill,
Yeah,
if I was to describe what I'm going, if I was going to guide us in
yeah,
a initial meditation, first class thing,
mm,
first I would describe the instructions. And what I say is that what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to first, I'm going to ask you to notice the physical sensations that are present at the moment, like the feel of your tush against the seat, your feet against the floor, your clothes against the skin, sound of the air conditioner, the smell of the carpet. Just notice the physical sensations because you can't have a physical sensation in any time other than the present moment.
right.
You can't feel my tush against the chair in the future or the past, like, right?
Yeah,
So that kind of grounds us into the present for the moment. Then I would say form an intention to place your attention on the physical sensation of breathing.
okay.
And then immediately within a few seconds, your mind's going to go off into a fog of rumination and projection.
Yeah,
You're going to be thinking about, did you leave the stove on or what I have to bring for breakfast and blah, 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 blah. But here's the thing, Lawrence, I'm sure that you've been in a situation where you wanted to listen to somebody. Of course, you want to listen to somebody, then all of a sudden you notice that you're not listening to them.
Yeah.
And because you wanted to listen to them, your brain kind of goes, psst, psst, listening,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
And there's a little feeling, a little startled, like a little feeling like, oh, I'm not listening. When you
Yeah.
realize that you're not listening, we call that startled feeling. We call that waking up.
Yeah.
And then what happens is you get a flood of judgments about the fact that you haven't been listening, and you beat yourself up for a couple of moments and the like. But then eventually you go back and you listen again. You go back to listening, even though you're thinking, how am I going to get him to say the stuff that he said when I wasn't listening, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So place an intention that's like, I want to listen. Place an intention on the fit that you're going to put your attention on the physical sensation of breathing. And then your mind wanders. But because you created the intention, your mind's going to go, psst, psst, hey, you're not paying attention to your breath.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're going to get a flood of judgments. I didn't focus. I lost concentration. I'm doing it wrong, blah, 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 blah. And if you just hang with them and let them run through, then you can go back and say, well, now I'm going to put my attention on my breath again. And you begin again. You start over.
Yeah.
You just come back and start over. And then in 2 seconds, your mind is off again. And then you're not paying attention to your breath. And you wake up again and you return and you say, okay, I'm going to start over. I'm going to begin again. And then your mind wanders off again. And then you wake up and you come back and you begin again. And it wanders and you wake up and you come back and you begin again. It might happen 10, 12, 15 times in 10 minutes, 20 times, 30 times in 10 minutes. The first time. First time you might go away and it won't be until halfway through the meditation that your brain says, psst, psst. Maybe it doesn't at all. Maybe it'll be the second or third time. It doesn't matter. It is not maintaining focus that's the goal. It is beginning again. It is coming back and beginning again. Every time you do that, you're basically saying to yourself, I can handle this. I can do this. I can do this. And it builds up your tolerance for discomfort because you just went through all of those judgments. And still, if you get thrown off the horse, you get back up in the saddle. And what we're learning how to do is to get back in the saddle.
Yeah.
And that process of coming back and starting over and coming back and starting over, beginning again, over and over, it teaches you a skill that you didn't know you had. And it also, the big thing is that in ADHD, your thoughts are running and you're noticing that your thoughts are running.
Yeah.
I think the biggest difference between ADHD and a person that does not have that biological ADHD that meditates is for people with ADHD, you are already observing your thoughts. I need to help you learn to step back one step further and become an observer of the observer that is observing your thoughts.
Right. That's
Most
interesting.
folks, all I need to do is to get you out of your thoughts into observing your thoughts. But people that have ADHD are already doing that all the time.
Yes.
And it's not helping. So we got to go back one more level. And so
that's really interesting because, I mean, the way when you were describing it before, about when you're listening to people and you catch yourself saying, oh, you're not listening. I've often described, I've got conversations going on in my mind whilst I'm listening to somebody having a conversation, and it can be 2 or 3 voices saying, make sure you're paying attention, but also make sure you look like you're paying attention. And then I'll have instructions as to say how I should be reacting to everything. And then even when I'm about to say stuff, I'm thinking about how's this going to land. And it's just, and when I describe this to my girlfriend who, is neurotypical, she's like, Wow, must be tiring, was it? Yes, it is.
So,
But I just wanted to also reflect on something that you said in terms of the goal of, or changing the goal. And the goal is the ability to restart. And at the beginning of our discussion, I was talking about the challenges that I sometimes have. Whilst I know I've witnessed the benefits of practicing meditation over long periods of time, but also still being faced with the challenge of feeling like that this is hard. I think it comes down to what is the goal of doing the meditation? Because sometimes I think people fall into the trap of thinking they have to be perfect at meditation in order to do it. And if they can't sit and breathe and concentrate on the breathing without having the thought, they think that to meditate, you can't, it's where your mind completely clears.
yeah.
And I think that really,
If it's not wandering, if you're not coming back and beginning again, you're not meditating.
yeah.
The mind must wander.
Well, this is the thing. I think one thing that is a common thing for a common challenge or a common saboteur for people with ADHD is perfectionism. And if it's being a high achiever or at least a procrastination, because they think if I'm not going to do it right, then I don't want to be rejected by getting it wrong. So this is why the people that, need meditation the most don't do it, because they think that they're not going to be able to do it properly.
Sure.
And what you're saying is if you change, the goal is the ability to come back because your mind will wander, then that I think is a useful thing to remember when you start. Yeah.
And also, I think another thing is that there's a certain parenting aspect of the mind. And I see this again and again. And there's a little bit of impishness in all of us
Yeah.
and a little bit of brattiness. And it's if there's a part of our mind that just wants to bother us. And the more we try to suppress it, the more attention we give it, the louder it gets. Just like a little bratty kid. The more attention he gets for doing something, the more often he's going to do it. And what we find in meditation, people will say to me, okay, well, this is happening. But I just follow the instruction. Just follow the instruction. Just follow the instruction. Just come back and begin again. Come back. But what happens is that as we allow, and here's the big thing, when you're doing this, like I say, you generally get a flood of judgment. But after you do it, I'm not talking months, I'm talking weeks. After you do it a couple of weeks, you literally get bored of those judgments because they come back and they repeat themselves over and over. You get so familiar with them. You get so familiar with you're saying, I did it wrong. I didn't keep focus. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And now that I'm sitting 10 minutes a day and I'm saying it to myself 3, 4, 5, or 6 times in a 10-minute period, by the time the 5 days or 7 days has gone by, you literally get bored of it.
Yeah.
And when you get bored of it, they lose their power.
Right.
On their own. They lose their power and they go away. You can't make them go away. You can just allow them to come until you get bored of it and you don't want to hear it anymore because you're bored of it.
Yeah.
And it's just like a parent has a very tough time learning to not engage their child's bratty behavior, but rather to say, well, if you want to act like that, I'm just going to go in the other room. Parenting, if you deprive the child of your presence instead of punishing them, it's generally more effective at reducing the behavior. Punishing can often aggravate the behavior, but if you just say, look, if you love me and you want me to be around, I'm not going to be around. You can do what you want, but I'm just going to go in the other room because I don't like to be around that. And that's a very effective way of parenting. And it's the same thing with your mind.
Yeah.
Whereas most of us, the intuitive way is to try to stop it and reduce it and suppress it. It's just the opposite. By allowing it without resistance, you get bored of it and it kind of just
I wonder if, because you mentioned something before, which I think is also another key saboteur for people with ADHD, and what you were just saying then about after a while they lose their power. You mentioned rumination before, and certainly something that I have experienced when meditation, and I was practicing. I was in a class and practicing something called labeling, and
Labeling.
essentially when you're meditating and you allow thoughts to arrive this in normal life or whilst you're trying to meditate, these thoughts can be things that lead to rumination. You pay attention to the thought and then you think, oh, and then it starts unraveling and it's like one thing after the other, and you lose yourself in all those thoughts. But when I was taught to do this labeling, it gave me an opportunity to, almost like you said, the observer of the thought. The labeling was just say, is that something that I'm worried about? Or it's something that I'm worried about in the past, or something that I'm worried about in the future? And if you just label it with one of the other things, it's almost like you've named it and it's lost its power
Absolutely.
and then it goes away.
Absolutely. Yeah, like right around maybe the third week, when we get the basic skill down, the next thing we move into is labeling thoughts. And I generally in class will do a brainstorming of all the labels that we can come up with. So
Mhm.
you have gambling thoughts. I bet he's
Mhm.
not going to. You have memory thoughts, you have threatening thoughts, you have hoping thoughts, you have just there's all kinds of labels that you can do it. And then what you find is the way that the metaphor that I generally use is if you come into your desk and it is in complete disarray and there are papers all over the place, it's very anxiety producing. Remember, anxiety and the fear of seeing a snake are identically biologically. And so when I become anxious, my mind is going to be looking for the danger and it's going to increase its activity because there's danger. I have to solve it. Where is the danger? I can't identify it. So you come into your desk, it's in total disarray, and you feel anxious. Okay, now you have 100 tasks to do in your life, and most of them are somewhere on your desk. But you say, I'm going to go organize it now. So you
Mhm.
get a bunch of files, and you label the files, and you start putting things in the files. And then you take the files and you put them together, and then you put these files in that file drawer and these files in that file drawer. You haven't accomplished one task, but you've labeled everything and organized it all, and somehow you will not feel as anxious. That is the same thing that labeling your thoughts in your mind does for you. Right now, it's in disarray, and all of these thoughts coming, and you're anxious because they don't seem to have any connection and they're all disorganized. But the moment I start labeling them, it's almost as if I acknowledge the thought, I recognize its quality, I put a label on it, and I put it in the drawer. I'm not, if I need it later, I can come get it. I know where
Yeah.
it is. I've done something. And then you start to notice that, oh, I use this label a lot. That's interesting. I never
Mm.
realized I had that many of those kinds of thoughts.
Right.
And you start to friend your mind. Now, I'm not going to say that there ever comes a time when your mind is quiet. But I think that you can get to a point where all of the craziness kind of fades into background noise, like sirens in the city. If you live in the city, that you hear sirens all the time, but they're just background noise. You're aware of them, but you don't pay any attention to any. So that there's always, even with me, 20 years, there's constant blah 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 blah, blah, but it's out the window and down the street.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just conscious of the time that we've got left, and there's
Uh-huh.
one thing that would like to cover before we do. So you you mentioned at the beginning the tennis analogy. You first
Mhm.
got to learn to hit it back over the net before you can learn the scoring system, and you talked about what came after learning to hit it over the net. And I wonder, you started off by talking about your program and gratitude journaling and the importance of that. I wonder if you could expand on that and what role that plays.
So I've been thinking about this a lot lately. As a matter of fact, I just wrote a couple of blogs and a couple of poems around it. happiness. So there have been wisdom teachers throughout the ages. And you can name your own. Lao Tzu and Confucius and Buddha and Gandhi and Mandela and Jesus. All of them are great wisdom teachers. Whatever their deity status may be is above my pay grade. But but they are all wisdom teachers, and I've been thinking about this a lot. It seems like they all came and told us to do all these nice things, and we kind of think that they want to make us better people so that we can make a better world. And I've been thinking lately that is not what they were trying to get across to us. What they were trying to get across to us is please be happy.
Mm.
Please be happy. And
Yeah.
they knew and they intuitively understood that the way and the path to happiness was to balance out and find antidotes to the things that make us unhappy. The things that make us unhappy are unsatisfiable greed,
Yeah.
right? Things I want that I can't have. Things that I don't want. I don't want them around me, but they're around me and they bother me, and I don't want to be annoyed, and it makes me upset when they're around. I can't get rid of them. And then not understanding how things work, ignorance. These are the big things that, if you get down to the very roots of it, wanting, not wanting, and not understanding are the things that make us unhappy. And what they said, they understood. That's all right. They probably didn't know the brain science, but that's all
Yeah.
right brain stuff. And they're all saying, if you cultivate the opposites, for greed, cultivate generosity. For hate, cultivate compassion and empathy. For ignorance, cultivate wisdom. Do these things because please be happy.
Yeah.
And so it's all about the path to happiness. How do we get there? And we find that by opening our heart, by connecting with other people, by feeling that maybe there's something more important than just me, by being significant in my own insignificance, those kinds of thoughts and thinking really lead us to a much more peaceful and happy life.
Yeah. I found a great benefit recently. I mean, gratitude journaling, again, is something that I know has a great benefit, but again, sometimes feels hard to do. And I keep coming back to some of these recurring themes about perfectionism in, in, in terms of you sitting there after the fifth or sixth day of journaling, you're like, well, I'm using the same things that I'm,
Yeah,
you know,
let me address that.
yeah,
So I was once 315 pounds,
right. Okay.
and my wife found a poem somebody else wrote called Choose Your Hard.
Yeah.
And it said, marriage is hard and divorce is hard. You're hard.
Right. Okay.
Being out of shape is hard.
Yeah.
Dieting is hard.
Yeah.
Choose your hard. Being weak is hard. Going to the gym is hard. Choose your hard.
Yeah.
So all I can say to you about it's hard, choose your hard. I mean, nobody promised you it was going to be easy. Maybe
Right.
it's hard, but again, choose your hard, because it's hard to sink down into the rat hole. It's hard to have uncontrolled and untreated ADHD.
Yeah.
That's hard, to be completely unbound.
Yeah.
And it's hard to bind it. Choose your hard.
That's what I was going to say. Because again, with the meditation, it's something that can quite easily prevent me from doing the journaling. But once I do it, it serves as, and to talk about the chimp brain again, we mentioned earlier that we can put a lot of blame on the chimp brain as being like at fault for being fight, flight or freeze. But at the same time, the chimp brain is also where we can automate a lot of habitual processes that make life easier. So if we can cultivate good habits, then we're going to have good habits that we can do automatically, and that will be our chimp. So we can celebrate the chimp, but in order to get the chimp feeling better and less rejected or feeling fear of not being perfect, etc., it's really important to just remember to be happy, but also say, look at the small things that you're grateful for, or how connected you are to other people, and look at all the things you have achieved. And,
And surround yourself with
yeah,
beauty. Really,
yes,
I
yeah,
promise you that whether or not you have a thought that makes you happy, or whether you see a sunrise that makes you feel awe, or whether what it doesn't really matter inside your brain. It all does the same stuff. It's all biochemically the same. So, I mean, that's it. And also, here's another piece of brain science that I think is important to that. We all know that in a light bulb, the filament, when they used to, before they were LEDs,
yeah,
the filament was very thin. And because it was very thin, it resisted the electricity. And it was through the resistance that it heated up and glowed.
right,
Okay. We also know that if I replace that filament with a thicker copper wire, it wouldn't heat up at all, because there would be no resistance, because the electricity would be able to flow easily through the thicker wire.
right,
The brain is neural pathways. They are literally wires.
yeah,
Why? And neurons that fire together wire together and form a pathway. If a pathway is thin, what it feels like emotionally is, oh, this is hard to do. I don't like crossword puzzles. I'm not good at crossword puzzles. I'm not good at math. When a neural pathway is thicker, what it feels like emotionally is, oh, yeah, I can do that. I can do
yeah,
crossword puzzles. I'm good at crossword puzzles. Those are the emotional responses to the physical attributes of the brain. So there's no way of getting around the fact that you're going to feel uncomfortable when you start, but if you just keep doing it, even if you had to fake it till you make it, it's okay. Because every time you're building that neural pathway, and finally there will come a time when you say, I like doing this. And
fantastic.
I wish I had a magic wand, but there's no
Yeah,
way to get around it.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, essentially, I think that's the important thing. Is like we've said, is it will feel uncomfortable, but the benefits are hugely fantastic.
It
And
will feel more comfortable if you
yeah,
just keep at it.
exactly. So if just to finish on then, Bob, if you could just tell the listeners, if they want to learn more about meditation and your classes, etc., where can they find you?
They can find me, and also a couple of free ebooks that I wrote about how to get started at awiseandhappylife.com.
And I'll put the link to that in the show notes. So thank you so much, Bob. It's been a really fascinating conversation. I'm sure we could have gone on for hours.
Hours.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you so much.
well, there we have it. Thank you so much for listening this far. If you want to hear more episodes, then please subscribe on YouTube or whatever podcast platform you use. It really helps to spread the word. So if you know anyone this episode could help, then please share it with your friends. If you want to follow me on social media, I am on Instagram at ADHD_goals, and you can find me on Facebook too. If you want to get in touch with the show, then you can email me at hello@adhdgoals.co. And finally, if you're struggling to manage your ADHD and you would like me to be your coach, then please head over to my website and get in touch. Until next time, bye for now.